Hi, I'm Erin Sarofsky.
And I'm Austin Shaw.
This is Between the Keyframes.
Are you ready for part 2 of our interview with Sekani Solomon? Welcome back to Between the Keyframes.
Okay, let's do our little quickfire session.
Yes.
You could just answer quick.
Yes.
Quick.
Yes.
Okay, so what were you like as a kid?
Outgoing, a little mischievous. I was always outside. I used to make a lot of toys, cardboard and tape. I was always trying to do something different and creative.
Fun. Okay,
Cool.
this is a big question. What is more important, talent or hard work?
Hard work for sure.
Okay.
Let me get in 1-1.
Okay, yeah. I like you guys.
All right. Yeah. What are your hobbies?
I like playing instruments, guitars in the back. Play drums. I was playing both yesterday. And I used to like doing a lot of board sports. I used to skateboard, snowboard, and I still snowboard and skimboard. Don't really skateboard at all.
Cool.
Okay. What is your favorite font?
Don't have one. Do like Universe though.
Okay, well that could be your favorite font.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I know the answer to this, but if you didn't have to work, if you had like all the money, would you keep making stuff?
Yes.
Of course. Yeah.
You have to.
Okay. Should I keep going off?
Yeah, keep going.
I mean, like, you guys know each other. For me, this has
Right.
been an amazing opportunity to get to know you. Okay, tell me your 3 most dominant personality traits.
Oof. That's a great question. I'm a Gemini. So people
That's why you guys
Gemini
met.
brother.
Yeah. So I could be like a extroverted introvert. Maybe an introverted extrovert. Because like when I go out, I'm out I'm talking with everyone, life of the party, but then after that, like I need to recharge and I'm like, don't talk to me. You know, I'm like chilling in the zone. I think
I went to get these. I got these for myself for my birthday.
was it tight?
Gemini Vans.
Nice. Yeah, this is our month. This is our time. Let me see. That liking food, that's not a personality trait. I'm very particular about certain things and not very particular about others. I think that's always like my fiance is always marvels at like how particular I am with my work and how super organized I am. But then with like other life things I'm not. So that, and I'm pretty level-headed. Actually, the more stressful the situation is, the more
calmer.
Yeah. I work pretty well under stress. I think I like it when there's like a fire under me, because then I'm like, all right, cool. I gotta really push.
Hashtag relatable. Is that what the kids say these days?
Yeah. I see.
That's probably why we get along. I'm just nodding my head. I'm like all those things. I'm like, yep, I get that.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Chill, man.
Well, I'm
Tell us about your.
Yeah.
Oh, Sag. So you're just like whatever.
No, I'm.
You're like, this stuff is nonsense. I'm gonna do my own thing.
Whatever you guys say, I'm just gonna have my own opinion about it.
Yeah. No,
I think actually you might have evolved me in some directions. I'm gonna look into this like time off thing.
I was gonna bring it back to the ego thing because something I told Erin is that one thing I remembered about you as a student is that it was very obvious how talented you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, but you did, like, there was no ego. Like, I was always just like, I remember students would come up to you and be like, can you show me how to do this thing in Cinema 4D? And you'd be like, yeah, sure. Like, or I'd be like, hey, can you demo this thing? Or whatever it was. Like, there was never any arrogance or like, I'm the shit. Like it was always like, you were just like a very humble dude. And yeah, I'm just curious. Like, I mean, we kick that around, and it, because sometimes I have students who are just, don't have, who have really
Yeah.
big egos, and
Right.
they don't have even the talent to necessarily back it up. So
Well, it gets in the way of the work too. 'Cause
Yeah.
it stops you from evolving because you know.
And I think internships really helped with that.
Mhm.
You gotta,
Yeah,
you might be the hot dude in your class, but you get out there, you're just like, you're starting from zero. And you're not really going to advance that much. You have to understand there's always people to learn from. Always.
Yeah, always.
And you always have to keep an open mind to different ideas. And even if you're the best creative leads, ask designers their opinions. Or like, what do you think about this? Is this the best way to go? What do you think? Or, you have to get, feedback. And I think good leadership is also discerning, what good feedback is. You could hear something from someone and it might not be good, but at least you got a different opinion and you could be able to suss out what's good and what's not. And I've always taken that approach. The work should speak for itself. If the work is good, you shouldn't have to
say anything.
Right, exactly. Like even if you don't know in that moment, if they keep tabs, eventually they'll find out. Yeah, I mean it's fine if you have an ego, just keep it to yourself, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like confidence and ego are two different things.
Yeah, true.
Confidence and competence they inform ego, but I think like the ego we're kind of talking about comes from insecurity.
Yeah, and that really shows how people take feedback as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times, and this always happens, sometimes you give someone feedback, you're like, oh, why are you making me change this? Like the time they spent protesting the feedback,
they could have just
done it or tried it.
Yeah, tried.
Right. And for me, if I get feedback I disagree with, I typically would mark it up to kind of show like if this is going to work or if it's not. So if I like, okay, this isn't going to work, I mean, mark it up to show you why it won't work. So that way there's a case versus like, oh, I'm just going to say it. And sometimes I try something that I thought it wasn't going to work and then it works. And then I'm like, oh, thank you for this feedback. So sometimes you just never know. And that's why kind of leaving your ego at the door, you give yourself the opportunity to learn something new and different. Yeah.
I think that's like, I feel like you should be one of us because we also have an episode on feedback. Like how to just like, one, if you're coming into a brief-driven project, that is the main ingredient of the job is that there will be feedback. Unless it's a personal project or a passion project or you're being commissioned to do something art-wise, like you're gonna get feedback. And it's best to just go into it open and know that until you deliver, you're going to be addressing feedback. Yeah, your creative director's feedback, your client's feedback, your client's client's feedback, your client's client's feedback. Like it's all coming at you.
It was interesting too. I remember in my senior year, I can't remember what class it was. It's like a media studies class, and we had to give a talk about something. And my talk was about like understanding in the professional realm, like the work you do is not necessarily your work, and you have to have this balance of detachment but caring. People are like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Because you think about
that hadn't occurred to them yet,
right? And
right.
Is having that understanding because a lot of things get killed, a lot of things get delayed, and you have to have again like that understanding that you're working in service of a brief or a client, and that's the job. And that's why again like having that early on experience kind of teaches you that maturity about the work. Like things happen. If you want nothing to get killed, that's why you make your own projects. But if you're a professional, you gotta roll with the punches, even if it would if it hits.
It's interesting. I heard you talk a lot about ownership, owning your own work, and ownership is something I talk about in the realm of being a creative director, because as a creative director, I feel like my job is to make every single person involved in the job feel ownership of it. Like if the client feels like they impacted the outcome and that they were important in the process, they feel ownership over it. If my artists on the job feel like they problem solved, they were able to put their talent and time towards creating something amazing, they feel ownership over it. And then if everybody's happy and they feel ownership over it, I feel ownership over it because I know I help facilitate all of that. I didn't just I didn't just walk over to somebody's computer and say, make it blue and bigger. I say, that needs a little more emphasis. Can you help figure that out?
Right.
And that's a different way of being. And then when a client has a suggestion, feedback, whether it's good or bad, doesn't matter. I say, hey, we're going to try that. And then when we try it and it does or doesn't work, but it moves the process forward, I can take that back to them and say, hey, while that idea didn't work out, like it took us here. And I think that's really interesting. And that means they impacted the outcome and can feel ownership over it. Like they were important in that process. And I think that is just essential. Like,
oh yeah.
So, yeah.
So when people have skin in the game and they feel like they have attachment to the project, you see the work become better. It feels elevated because you care.
Right.
And that's how it's been for me at Cash. Obviously, always got to keep in mind, you just have to have that fine balance. But I don't find myself having to itch to do personal projects as much, even though I'm really getting a big itch these days.
It happens.
But I get to really put my all into some of these projects and not necessarily have it be watered down, which is refreshing and an opportunity I do not take for granted.
Yeah. In a way, I'm hearing that Cash hired you because you're you and you have like a personal point of view on the world and on art and on creativity, and what you're doing. And you have a real vision there. And so I'm wondering if they see it as like, we just hired Andy Warhol, to like come in and handle all their stuff and to mentor a team in that vision and all of that. And so I am wondering if you actually do own the work or if Cash still does own the work. Like how, or is that like was that not discussed, or does it not matter because you could do what you want with it?
Oh, well, own the work in terms of what exactly?
Like actual ownership. Like, so when my studio does work, we don't own any of it.
Right.
It's all work for hire.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I love about this concept of ownership. There's like real ownership. Like when we hand over those files, like we own our working files.
Right.
We don't own the software.
Right.
We borrow that, right? We rent it, so that gives us privileges to use it. And we don't own the renders and the outcome, but we own our files.
Right.
We usually don't own our assets unless we purchase them, but usually we're purchasing them on behalf of the client. And I think this is interesting because ownership as a concept is very practical and real, but it's also how we feel about the job.
Yeah.
And that's really important. That's like gets into company culture and to what you're talking about.
Yeah, for me, the ownership I think comes in the value I provide. Because when I was hired,
awesome.
No one. This is the difference too in a tech company. Like no one knows what you do, right? Okay. You're coming in. You have to do like a lot of education about the process. People just don't understand how like 3D visuals are created and all of that. So when I was hired, I was pretty much like a one-man studio. I was coming up with ideas. I was feeding things from start to finish, like idea to final execution. But in that, there was value. Like there's an argument not even an argument. Like I'm saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in production costs because I can create stuff entirely by myself.
Yeah.
And now the idea is like, how could we build something like that in-house where we could do that so we don't always have to go to like these other studios to get stuff done. And for me, that's where a lot of the ownership comes in because it's allowed me to work at things at a bigger scale, which then allows me to show that value to other people if I choose to go somewhere else.
Right.
Because that's really what you're offering as a creative is your creativity, your
point of view. Yeah,
exactly.
This is something I get all the time, and I gotta be very frank about this. I'm getting so many calls that start with, hey Erin, we'd really like to have you speak at this thing because you're a woman.
Oh my gosh.
You're a woman. We need women. Women don't like to do this. Like, it's literally that blatant sometimes. No, just call me and say, hey, Erin, I love your fucking work. Can you come and talk? Right? Like, or you're yada, yada, yada. Hey, Erin. But they are very blatant in saying, like, hey, we need a woman. And I'm like, okay, I can get past it because I do believe that having women see a woman is, like, probably one of the most important things I could do.
Yeah.
In terms of giving to the community is like reflecting back to them, because I did not have that. I had no female leaders around me at all, let alone business owners. So I think that that's really important. But then if I have to pass on it, they give me can you give me the list of women?
Right.
As if I have the list of women, which of course I fucking do. Right? Because I'm an advocate for, and I do give the list of women and sometimes even make the introductions. But I try to leave the lady thing out of it, though it's probably completely obvious. And I'm wondering if you have the same thing with being a person of color.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Okay.
Great question. I don't think anyone's like, the semantics are always interesting.
Yeah.
Where, sometimes they will say it without saying it in that sense. But I mean, the truth is I work in an industry that is not very diverse at all. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, I'm like, regardless of the situation, I always feel compelled, like I have to do it because representation is needed in that space. But it also, I think one kind of benefit of being like in a visual industry is that the work usually leads and then the person behind the work comes after it.
Yeah.
So then it's like, oh, the work's good, and then who does it? And, the work could be good enough to the point where it's like, if there was kind of any kind of any type of unconscious bias, it would kind of see past that. Mm-hmm. And I guess I've been fortunate in that sense. But yeah, when it comes to speaking engagements, regardless, I feel like I kind of I have to do it to encourage like the next generation of people.
I also think we have such a different point of view, because what you were talking about, like, especially being a student coming here, like, it wasn't guaranteed that you'd have employment in the U.S. So you knew you were going to have to work twice as hard and be way further than any other student to get a job. Because it was going to require a commitment from an employer. That's a privilege that none of these people talk about ever.
100%. It's like, just to have the opportunity to get to do the work. Yeah. I've definitely been lucky with two things: opportunity, but also making the best of those opportunities, because you have to, because you don't get them. And a lot of people here do.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about NFTs, and I saw what you sold Hidden, your film Hidden. Yeah. So like, how does that feel?
It felt good. I felt like I entered the space when it was like a little bit of it was kind of going down. So in the back of my mind, I'm always like, oh, maybe I could have gotten it for more. But I'm always like, yeah, well, no one had to buy this in the first place.
Right. So yeah,
I'm still like, yeah, this is more money than I had just having it, be as a film. So that's also, for someone to see the value, to be able to spend, like Ethereum on it was
amazing.
Yeah, it's really amazing. But I don't want to to be honest, it's way more stressful to make content with money in mind.
Yes.
And I do not like it. I just like making something, not thinking about it. If I want, I'll put it out. But I don't want to think, all right, I need to make something short so it sells for NFT. That's my day job.
Yeah. Yep. That sells, gosh. That makes a lot of sense. It's also something we talked about with it. Like, when you do a passion project, you can't have some idea of what it's going to do for you. You just got to go into it to create the thing. And what it will do is surprise you in that either it won't perform or it will perform, or it performs 10 years later when
Right.
people find it. It's certainly going to add something to you as a person that is
Right.
unteachable, otherwise.
No, you're
Awesome.
right. I had
what-
I had some of
Go
that
for-
from Star Wars because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is an IP that people know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my back of my mind, I was like, I really hope it gets to 1 million views. That would be cool. I mean, it's like so different. You kind of hope people appreciate it. But also with films and that type of stuff, it is a product that still has to be marketed. It's funny, right? Because like you make an ad, but the ad still needs to be marketed.
Yeah,
to market
media.
something. Right. Like,
They spend
market
way more
something
on the
else.
media than they do making a thing.
Right.
That's for sure. People don't realize that, especially our young listeners.
Yeah.
If they spend 50 grand on you as the studio or artist making something, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to place
Push
it
it
and
out.
put it all out there.
Right. Exactly.
So you're
So
a
it's
small percentage of what is going on.
Right. And that's what you learn also at like a bigger company.
Yeah.
Like, because at studios, I was like, oh, like, why don't we just go to the client directly? Then you'll realize, oh, well, the agency is handling,
The
like
media.
Media buyers.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And the account management and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bunch of other moving pieces. But now I think a lot of big companies are taking that stuff in-house as well. So
Big
now,
time.
yeah, so a lot of studios, companies are going direct to now, which I think makes sense because in-house they can handle a lot of the agency-ish stuff. But I just go back to the Star Wars thing. Yeah, I did feel some pressure, but fortunately, like initially it was kind of a slow build, and then after like a couple days, I was like, it is what it is. Whatever it does, and then it kind of blew up from there. So I was very fortunate to get that. It's never guaranteed. But yeah, I just like making stuff. So I try to keep that process pure. And with NFTs, I think that kind of muddied the intention behind it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because also, there's a whole mental health thing going on when the Beeple thing. When Beeple sold those first couple things
Oh
for
my
like
God. Yeah, for all of us.
right, right. And I feel like no one was really talking about it at the time, and certain people started to talk about it because here you are spending, this is like your life. You've been doing design, motion design, and then people comes in, just becomes a millionaire, just selling stuff. You could, people have been doing the whole life. I think Beeple's different because he has the context of he's the only one literally to make as much images as he had daily.
Completely.
But still, I think it's natural for people to have a sense of FOMO. It's like, wait,
Big
this is,
time.
and then like, I think it was February, March. You just scroll down Twitter, and everyone is selling stuff, and you just see like these guys came up with, oh man, just sold a 200,000, or I just did this, and just did that, and it's kind of grained on you, and a lot of people were feeling that, and I think then people really were like, well, how can I get in on this money? And it wasn't really much about the book. It was about like, how can I cash in? And that I think, made it tough, like mentally. Like even as much success as I had in my career, I was feeling it.
Of course. Yeah, like
Right. You want to get recognized. You're like, me too.
Right. But then you realize like none of your success in this industry translated. You kind of have to start from scratch and build yourself up
And it
in
almost
space.
seems like, I don't know, this is for me from my like 45-year-old dude's perspective of like, it obviously like there's talent, but I also did see I see a lot of NFTs. I'm just like, really? Like that's all for what? But anyway, it seems like if you're sort of in an influencer status, you already have a massive following.
Oh, yeah.
Like it seems like that is a bit. It's almost like more like a popularity than a quality maybe
thing.
in some instances, not in all cases. But it did see like a lot of the people who spent a lot of years building up these
libraries.
These followings and off of the libraries of their work, doing really well, right? Like I think that's cool. That's like and even when they're like posting on Instagram for years and years, it's like it wasn't like they're like, oh, one day I'm gonna get paid for all this.
Right.
It just sort of happened, that's that passion project.
Right place, right time.
Ethos, yeah.
Okay, so passion projects. You talked about getting the itch. You have your hidden piece and your Star Wars piece, which is both really beautiful. Are you thinking about doing a new one soon?
Yeah, I have like PTSD, especially from Star Wars, just because like I know how much of a commitment it is, especially from a time perspective, and like
that's like writing a book. I get the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm working on a new textbook, and it's like, okay, I'm going back in there.
Yeah, but
it's like really, going in the cave. Yeah, it takes a lot of time.
It is. It's like a mental thing, but really, I think when you get into the groove and you start, it's a lot better. But it's just starting and getting that time. Also, summer's just like the worst time to start a project because you just want to be outside. So maybe in the fall it's cool, you're inside more. I'd be like, all right, cool, time to spend more time in the machine. I have an idea. I have knocking the ball, but also there's this pressure. Like I've done these 2 films, that's been great, and I'm like.
You set the bar high. You got the expectation.
Right.
You did. Maybe shorter. I mean, like with NFTs, and you've done well with NFTs, like maybe, because with students, I'm always saying, like, you don't have to do these long things like us professionals do, like you can do a 5-second thing or a 10-second thing and really knock our socks off. And, it doesn't, maybe it's like a series of little short things that you're doing.
You see, but I like
the film.
Yeah, because I feel like it has. Because right now I see so many like short things looks really good, and I'm like, I really want something that has like a bigger picture idea and thought throughout it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think especially in the early 2010s, there were so many cool films I used to see. There's like a point of view.
Music
expression.
Videos,
yeah, and because of social media, everyone's about the clips, and no one's really like even if 5 people watch it, sure, but as a personal challenge, I just love creating something that has like a little bit more staying power,
right? A little meat to it.
Yeah,
right.
So is your process like how it would be in a studio where you do the concept, do some writing around it, do a storyboard, build an animatic? Do you follow that process pretty closely?
Exactly. There's so much, like even with Star Wars, really getting the context of that film correct from the beginning was so important. There's so many Star Wars films, and I'm always asking like, okay, what can I do different? What can I do that someone hasn't done before? Because in this point in my career, it's not just about like making something pretty. Like I could do that, and I've been seeing it, and I'm like, well, what are people going to care about? And I always say that's my argument about Houdini. Like it's such a time suck from a technical perspective. And I'm like, now we see so many cool sims. It's getting to the point like it's nice, but
it's not different. Yeah,
right. It doesn't have the impact it did. Like when Manvi used to be dropping those Nike spots.
Yeah. Big
but
time.
now, like everyone's doing stitching, everyone's doing that. So the idea coupled with those effects, I think, was what is captivating. And
I agree.
It's a classic graphic design, classic storytelling.
Like, why are you doing it? Answering that question, but why? Like, cool, that's really cool, but why? Why did you spend your time making that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also, we see so much like really nice photoreal 3D too. I'm thinking to myself like, okay, what can I do to stylize things? Like, what can I do to give things a little bit more personality? And that's it's really been a challenge for me of late, like trying to figure out how to kind of refresh things and keep it different. And, and I think we just need to start. People need to think about that more. And I always keep preaching it, like idea.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'd like to thank Sekani for being our best first guest ever. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next episode.